Yeah, so I'm going to be talking about nasty noise and malicious noise. This talk will have to do with learning. These are both noise models for computational learning theory. And the main thrust of kind of the technical thing I want to explain, the main idea of the proof or the result that I'll hopefully give you the idea of has to do with cryptography. So it's at least 2 for 3, but I can't say that there's really a strong connection to meta complexity in this work. Maybe you will find a connection though, which would be interesting. So this is joint work with beloved co-authors Guy Blanc, Yijia Huang, and Tal Malkin. You've already learned something, which is that Guy and Yijia smile with their teeth and Tal smiles without her teeth. So there may be other insights as we go into good. So let's get into it. Happy with this paper. Okay, hopefully I can forward through the slides. So what does this talk about? It's a talk really about the relative power of these two well-studied and really rather difficult or challenging noise models in computational learning theory. One is called malicious noise. I'm going to try to consistently key that as purple throughout the talk as a visual cue. And the other one is even worse. It's called nasty noise. So originally malicious noise was invented, and I think with the idea that, oh, this is as bad as a noise model can get, but a couple of years later, people thought, oh, we can make it even more difficult and dark and devious. So the main question we're going to be interested in this talk is to understand what's the connection between these noise models. Like I said, nasty is tougher than malicious, but can we say something about the other direction? When does the ability to pack learn in the presence of nasty noise tell us that we can pack learn in the presence of malicious noise? Always. Could it sometimes be the case that if we can pack learn in the easier model, malicious, we can automatically upgrade that to pack learning in the harder model, nasty? So that's kind of the main question I'll be addressing in this work. And the title is now changed from overview to takeaway. I'll tell you the answer right now, so you can ignore or go to sleep for the rest of the talk or like check your email or something. The answer is unfortunately a little bit complicated. So here we go. There's 2 settings we're going to have to think about, or we're going to be thinking about in this work. One is this sort of classic pack model, the so-called distribution-free learning scenario, where the distribution you're learning with respect to, the distribution of our examples is unknown and arbitrary. In that setting, we have a very clean, clear answer. These are essentially equivalent models. It turns out that if you can learn in the presence of malicious noise, you can also learn in the harder nasty noise model. This doesn't have anything to do with crypto. It's not going to be the main focus of the talk, but I'll at least sketch some results there. In the other setting, so-called fixed distribution pack learning, and here you should think of like learning under the uniform distribution. It's the, OG distribution is probably the cleanest and simplest distribution. If you're just thinking about uniform distribution learning, say, it's a more complicated answer. There's some nuances, and we'll see that there are like cryptographic constructions that come into give. We have a pretty good answer here too, but I couldn't fit it into one line of this slide. We'll see that cryptography comes into the picture there. Okay, so that's a little preview of where we're going. I think I can go through some of this stuff fairly quickly and hopefully painlessly. Hopefully this whole talk will be painless. It's the last talk, which feels like a long day. Yeah, let's get through some of the basics. Should be pretty clean because we've covered them before. So I think everything on this slide is stuff that we've seen already. We have this notion of a concept class. It's your favorite class of functions that you're interested in learning. We have this notion of an epsilon delta pack learning algorithm. I noticed that Russell and I seem to have opposite notions of which one is supposed to be epsilon, which one is supposed to be delta. For me, epsilon is the accuracy. So we're supposed to get an epsilon accurate hypothesis. And delta, or 1 minus delta, is the confidence. We're supposed to do it. The algorithm is supposed to give me such a epsilon accurate hypothesis with probability 1 minus delta. Okay, so we've seen this notion a couple of times, learning from random examples. And the distribution free phrase means you can handle any unknown distribution, and of course, any concept in the class. So far, so good? Good, okay. Yeah, why do we care about this kind of thing? There's lots of reasons. I don't feel like we have to flog this particular horse right now, but it's like a very natural setup in machine learning. You get some data from some source, and hopefully you learn something which can do well in the next data point generated by the same kind of process. And I guess Valiant's original motivation for thinking about this distribution-free setting was, the world is complicated. We can't hope to learn arbitrarily complicated concepts. But we may want to say, I really don't want to make assumptions about the world, and we try to capture that by saying that the distribution is unknown and really could be anything. Okay, so distribution-free learning, that's the basics. Fixed distribution learning, just think of it as learning under the uniform distribution. You lose nothing for the purposes of this talk. So we now only have to succeed in getting a high accuracy hypothesis with high confidence when our random examples are, say, uniform random strings labeled by the function. Okay, so the 2 different notions of learning, and you should have seen in the survey a couple of days ago, the results, what you can actually do, the facts on the ground are quite different for these 2 models. Good, okay. And what's the rationale for this? Well, it's like a nice, clean complexity theoretic notion that, fixed distribution learning, or particularly uniform distribution learning. Sometimes it's what you really want to do. Distribution free pack learning is quite difficult. We don't have as many positive results as we would like. So we're interested in both of these learning.
So no more computational efficiency. Just
Oh, this talk is going to be all about computational efficiency. We'll see why, but give me a few slides, okay?
Okay.
Okay, yeah. Yeah. So before I talk about that, I have to justify why am I getting in your, up in your face with like this epsilon and then delta at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. We talked about this in the survey, like, can't we always just boost confidence, by running repeatedly and testing each of our hypotheses and outputting one that seems to do well? And Russell gave us a whole beautiful tutorial about boosting accuracy. Can't we always, if we can achieve 51%, we can achieve 99%. So do I really have to be worried about these epsilon and delta parameters? Unfortunately, we do have to be worried in our setting of dealing with learning in the presence of noise. I'm going to tell you about these noise models in the next slide. I do have to worry about these parameters for a couple of reasons. We saw one of these reasons already, like in the uniform distribution setting, we went through this example. You can't hope to do accuracy boosting in the uniform distribution setting. There are simple learnable concept classes like monotone functions where you can learn to low accuracy, a little bit better than 50%, but you can't learn to high accuracy, information theoretic results. Okay, so the fixed distribution setting, we can't hope to boost. That's one thing. We can never hope to boost in these noise models that we're going to be talking about. Remember the phrase noise rate barrier, and we'll see that you can't hope to get accuracy beyond something which depends on the noise rate. So you can't push the accuracy arbitrarily high up. Okay, and even we'll see it turns out to be the case that confidence boosting is not so simple in some of these noise models. In fact, one contribution of this work is we sort of showed for the first time how to do confidence boosting in the nasty noise setting. So something which seems like it should be the easiest thing in the world, but in these noise models, it can become tough. Okay, so we do have to worry about like epsilons and deltas. Okay, but it won't be too painful still, I promise. Good. Okay, so far I didn't say anything about noise. Let me tell you about noise, right? It's obviously probably in a real world scenario too optimistic to assume that you always get perfect, correctly labeled examples. Sometimes there's going to be a noise process. Sometimes the world isn't going to be so nice. So you might be more familiar with something like random classification noise, a so-called benign noise model. I basically think of noise models in like, there are two camps that a noise model can live in. One is sort of a benign one, right? It's not adversarial. It's just some like random process, I don't know, background radiation or something like that. Maybe it's a geometric thing, and like your input examples, instead of getting the right value of where X is in Rn, you get like a little Gaussian perturbation of that or something. Or this famous random classification noise model, just 10% of the time or 49% of the time, instead of being given the right value of the function, you're given the negation, you're given the flipped fit. Okay, these are sort of noise models where there's nobody out to get you. There's nobody trying to mislead the learning algorithm. Okay, these are generally easy noise models. There are a lot of strong results known, general techniques, etc. In contrast, there are also adversarial noise models where you really want to think of it as like someone is out there to get you. There's some enemy who has a noise budget and they're trying to mislead you. Those are going to be the kinds of models we're going to talk about in this work. First one will be malicious noise, but it will get even worse. There's something worse than malicious noise, nasty noise. Okay, so that's where we're headed. Any questions? Martha?
Is there anything in between, like you can imagine a noise process where randomly it's not out to get you, but a bit shows up and a bunch of examples all at the same time are polluted, and then it turns off and then they're fine.
So some kind of like persistent bunching noise,
Yeah.
or like there's a word for this which I'm forgetting or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you can imagine all kinds of noise models. These are maybe sort of extremes.
So these are the extreme ones, and that we should think like there's some stuff in the middle, but this is like the most.
You could think of stuff in the middle, but people seem to focus their research on the extremes, a little bit.
So, a real world example of that is noise that comes in bursts.
Bursty, that's the word I'm looking for, exactly. Yeah, like a burst of
satellite transmission, you want to
precisely
keep it in level that here, I suppose, where you ask a sequence of questions, they're going to.
Yeah, for some period of time, you get bad noise, and for some period, they're definitely, you could, that's the phrase, that's the word I was looking for, bursty kind of noise, yeah. Or like in a DNA kind of application, some segment gets deleted, like you can imagine, probably assuming independent errors is a big assumption. Yeah. But it is the assumption that underlies the first noise model. So let me tell you now about this first noise model, so-called malicious noise. This was introduced, I think, in a paper that Valiant wrote just 1 year after the original path learning paper. That was 1984. This was a follow-up. So what's the deal with malicious noise? I'll try to visually remind you that I'm talking about malicious noise throughout the talk with this sort of impish looking icon. When we have malicious noise, what happens? Well, the learner's got this button it can press. In a noiseless scenario, when the learner presses the button, it would just get a fresh pair, X drawn from the distribution, the correct label of f of x. In the malicious setting, there's some noise rate eta. And when the learner presses the button, every time there's a 1 minus eta chance that is what happens, that it gets a noiseless example, but there's an eta chance that a malicious adversary just does whatever he or she wants. Malicious adversary gives you an arbitrary pair. Okay?
This may be what you're gonna be saying next, but
Yeah.
does the malicious adversary know all the randomness that the algorithm is using? Or does it just know previous queries, or does it have
Great.
to?
That's exactly what I'm gonna say next. Yeah, this is an online setting. We should think of the malicious adversary. It really is just a universal quantifier, right? That it's like for all possible examples. For all possibilities of what could be given here. So we can think of it as knowing past randomness. It doesn't know the future. It doesn't know what the next example will be that comes from the distribution or what future coin tosses will be. It's like an online kind of thing, although we will see an intermediate model where that assumption is relaxed. So yeah, this is one sense in which this adversary is maybe not as strong as it could be. It's online, it doesn't know the future. In another sense, really a stronger sense, is that if you imagine learning in the presence of malicious noise, say the malicious noise rate is 1% and you draw 1,000 examples, well, on average, you will get 990 clean examples, right, that are bona fide from the distribution, clean examples. You won't know which ones they are, you won't know which ones are the noisy examples, but there's a lot of clean data, in your hands when you're running an algorithm in this framework, okay? So it can get worse than this. Hopefully you'll agree this is a more terrifying icon to symbolize nasty noise. Nasty noise is nastier and worse than malicious noise. What's the deal with nasty noise? It differs from malicious noise in two ways. First, like we just said, it's not online. The learner gets to see an entire data set of clean examples, but it gets to see what the learner would have gotten had it not been a noisy scenario, okay? But beyond that, it doesn't then it's not the case that, independently for each of those examples, it has an opportunity to corrupt. Instead, it can choose, it is allowed to select sort of the most misleading subset of examples in order to confuse the learner. And we think of this, the definition is a little subtle. The marginal distribution over the number of examples which the adversary gets to corrupt is binomial. So like one thing the adversary can do is it could look at like its favorite eta part of the underlying data distribution and always make, corrupt that, always give you a corruption when you get that, because then that would be the noisy examples that you get, the number of noisy examples you get when you have m examples would be binomially distributed. But that would be sort of non-adaptive. It can also look at the particular outcome of the m samples you get and then make corruption so as to confuse you in the most misleading possible way. Okay, but it's like an eta noise budget, right? It can't corrupt. Every example would be hopeless to do anything. So there is this well-defined notion of the noise rate here. So you can see that this is clearly a more challenging, again, it's a more frightening figure. It's more challenging than malicious noise, because what is one thing the guy could do? He could just toss a coin and pick also an eta bias coin and pick which examples to corrupt, okay? So it certainly is no easier than malicious noise. And another thing which really does, arise when you're doing analysis in these frameworks, after a nasty adversary has worked over your data set, there is a real sense in which there are no clean data points, right? Because he looked at the entire sample of m examples that you would have gotten, selected, probably something like eta m of them to corrupt, and decided not to corrupt the other ones. So those are like the dogs that didn't bark or something, right? They're not clean examples drawn from the distribution. So it's subtle, like you lose independence and that creates some problems and some difficulties. So far, so good. Samuel.
So the non-adversary, whoever the guy is,
The
learner, do they get to request examples anyway? They just have to pick what comes from the distribution?
No, yeah, good question. These are like passive models. You don't get to make queries. You just press a button and something comes along. And you should think of these models, you press a button like m times, if it's like a learning algorithm that runs with m samples, and You get these corrupted data
Right.
sets,
So
yeah.
I'm just thinking, following, they have a master criminal who every time the police query something that would identify him, he changes the answer, right? And then the police might eventually notice that they're never getting any answers about this particular person.
Yeah, there are works where you can sort of say, okay, one thing that the nasty adversary could do is this, but if it does that, then like you'll be able to notice it, you respond, there can be a little bit of this like back and forth thinking in terms of
Right,
getting
so
results in these frameworks.
in other words, it seems like the learner could the learner change his query?
Well, the learner again, like
You're just not allowing that.
it's passive, the learner
passive.
just gets this data set, yeah, yeah. So there's sort of a limit to what you can do.
Is there any connection to agnostic learning?
I would think of these as kind of different models than agnostic learning, a little bit different. Like in agnostic learning, we often want to think of it that, you know, a third of the data points, like the opt is like 1/3 or something, a third of the data points are noisy in some sense. Here, it's not really like that. It's better to think of the noise rates as something like 1% in this setting. Yeah.
But still, if you have an agnostic learner, then you can like try to fit the data that you're given, whatever it is, as best you can. Is there an example where that's a bad thing to do, where that doesn't generalize to the distribution and you can do something else?
I don't know of like generic transformations where like if you have agnostic results, you get results in these models. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, building on top of like discussion, can you use like private fact learners to sort of get good accuracy models? Because like private fact sort of accommodates for the fact that you can change any of your single data point, and then group privacy sort of lets you edit like some, I don't know, some small fraction of the points that you have.
So you're saying like privacy implying that like small
Yeah.
changes in the data distribution don't change things too much. Good question. I don't know. I don't know if that's a formal connection people can make. Yeah, sorry.
Sorry, I'm scared about like the uncorrupted examples not being IID. Does that mean that like you can't use concentration bounds in this setting?
It means, we'll see this in a couple of slides, well, it means that in some settings, like simple analyses, which we're very used to and are very standard, confidence boosting is not straightforward. Like there are provable examples where like the usual approach to boosting the confidence of your learner fails in this setting. We can recover confidence boosting via something more complicated, but like, yeah, like things, you have to be quite careful in this setting. Yeah.
Just regarding the question, I'm not sure if it's a learning setting where there is a formal connection, but if like all you care about is mean estimation, there is indeed like the work that tries to connect like private mean estimation to this like nasty model. mean
I see,
estimation.
that makes sense for something like mean estimation, right?
But right now, you're just talking about classification
I'm
problems.
talking about path learning kinds of problems, yeah, like you wish you were doing path learning in the classic sense of, you know, binary classification, concept class, et cetera, but like, annoying, there's like this noise model, yeah, we're trying to understand what you can do. Okay. Okay, these are good questions. Other questions? Shall I continue? Okay, let me carry on. Good. So this gets back to the point I made earlier about like why we shouldn't expect something like, I guess, accuracy boosting. There's this so-called noise barrier in either of these models, whether it's malicious noise, whether it's nasty noise, even in a milder malicious noise setting, for basically any problem, you're never going to be able to learn to accuracy better than essentially the noise rate. Okay, and this should make sense. If someone can consistently lie to you, you know, 1% of the time, you shouldn't expect to be getting 99.999% truth or something. And you can have a simple example. Maybe your learning problem is you're just learning an unknown interval. Okay, it's the uniform distribution. So if there were no noise, this is trivial. You'd see a bunch of pluses, then you'd see a bunch of minuses, and you'd have your hypothesis be, you know, somewhere it is in the middle. But if you have a malicious adversary, so even in this setting where 1 minus, you know, eta of the points are noiseless, eta fraction of the points are malicious points that somebody got to put down, you know, wherever the adversary wants, the adversary can create confusion about exactly where is that boundary. You could have a picture, something like this, right? The true threshold is over here, and you could have a little window with something like, I guess, eta, which the adversary could slide back and forth, you know, 8/3 in this direction, 8/3 in this direction. You'll know, oh, the answer is somewhere in there. You're not going to be able to pin it down better than this, you know, essentially eta accuracy.
So for the malicious noise, it could be like 2 eta, right? Because
2
they
eta
could-
over 1 plus 2, I think, yeah.
Yeah, because they could say, oh, I'm gonna pick a two eta size region in my distribution, I'm not gonna tell you any information about it. And so what I'm gonna do is replace every label with a random label,
Yeah,
except half the time it's what you would have gotten anyway.
yes, you're
And
exactly,
so-
you're exactly right. The bound is, it's like 2 eta, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, for malicious noise. And nasty noise is something similar. Good, so we're not gonna get arbitrary accuracy. We have this kind of eta noise barrier, that's fine. What's this work about? So, okay, the facts on the ground, which I don't want to spend too much time on, are that there are some algorithmic results, techniques known which succeed in the presence of malicious noise, but we don't know that they succeed when you have nasty noise. One of these is this smooth boosting stuff that Russell was telling us about. That's a way of improving the accuracy of malicious noise tolerant weak learning algorithms. We didn't have previously a way to improve the accuracy of nasty noise tolerant weak learning algorithms. Another thing is some generic way to handle a little bit of malicious noise. I don't want to go into the details again, but we didn't have an analogous statement for handling the same level of nasty noise. Okay, so it, it kind of naturally raises the question. I think this is the kind of question that maybe this audience is interested in the abstract.
Wait, sorry, real quick, are they
Yeah.
known not to work?
No, they weren't known to work.
Okay, but it's not the case they're known not to work.
We've showed that they do work, in fact.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay,
so let's, so keep listening, yeah.
okay,
Very
sorry.
good. Right, so, right, the kind of generic question we're interested in is, you've got some learning problem, you have some concept class, suppose you can learn it in the presence of malicious noise at rate eta, the purple thing. What can we say about learning it under nasty noise? Can I learn it if the nasty noise is eta? Can I learn it if the nasty noise rate is eta over 2? Can I not even learn it if the nasty noise rate is, 0.01 times eta? How do these things go? Okay, this is the kind of question we're gonna care about.
When it says the adversary is computationally quick,
The adversary's, it's like the adversary's omniscient and like all powerful. It can do anything, subject to the constraints of the malicious, thing that it just gets corrupt examples, independently with its probability. We don't make computational assumptions about the adversary. Yeah. We do make computational assumptions about the learning. All these statements are only interesting if we're talking about computationally efficient learning. Okay, because if you're thinking about sort of non-computationally efficient learning, in all of these models, it's pretty boring, right? Like, what are you gonna do? You're gonna draw a bunch of examples. You're gonna do a brute force search over all the possible concepts in your class. You're gonna find the one that does the best. And all of these noise models, basically the adversary can only corrupt an eta fraction of points. So you'll find some hypothesis that's something like 1 minus eta accurate on the data set. And you do a turn-off, you do trivial generalization error kinds of arguments, and you learn. Okay, so these noise models, there's nothing interesting to say if you're not thinking about computationally efficient algorithms. But if you are thinking about computationally efficient algorithms, it's not clear, I think, what the answer to the question in the previous slide was. But that's why, like everything I'm talking about has to do with this, like efficiently. We only care about computational efficiency, and this sort of opens the door that, there might be like cryptographic techniques that come into the picture if we're going to have separations. Sneak peek, we will have separations based on cryptography. Okay, good. So hopefully we kind of understand the general question we're interested in. We have some motivation for it, and I'll tell you a bit about our results now. We have 2 sets of results. One is for the distribution-free setting, arbitrary path learning, unknown distribution. The other one is for fixed distribution learning. Just think of it as uniform distribution learning. Okay. Good. Most of the talk will be about the second bullet. Good. So the main result for distribution-free learning is that these notions turn out to essentially coincide. So sorry, this is a cut and paste from a paper we're writing, but we can go through it. It's not that bad. You've got any concept class. Sorry, we're also trying to maybe make it appealing to people who do machine learning. They like D for the dimension parameter instead of N the way we do. But yeah, so you've got any concept class of, over D bit strings, Boolean functions over D variables. Suppose you can learn it in the presence of nasty noise at noise rate eta, to your epsilon delta accuracy and confidence, and you can do it efficiently in polynomial time. Okay? Then you can also learn the concept class to essentially the same accuracy and confidence, 1.01 epsilon, 1.01 delta, again in polynomial and all of the relevant parameters time, even when you're in the nasty setting. Okay? So it's an automatic upgrade for efficient learning from being able to handle nasty, malicious noise to being able to handle nasty noise. Okay?
is it the same polynomial? You make it the same polynomial?
The exact same polynomial? No, we
No,
have some,
like roughly up to.
we have some overhead. It's not the exact same polynomial. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you want like a bumper sticker version of the theorem statement, it's this. You can handle this guy, you can handle the tougher guy. I'm not gonna say much about this because it's a little bit grungy. You have to go through a bunch of stages. So down at the bottom is like your algorithm. I don't know if you can read this. They can like handle malicious noise. And then we argue that, oh, you can like actually handle some related noise where there's some noise in like a mixture of distributions and then some other related distribution noise model. And then we're getting into the territory of nasty noise, handling different versions of nasty noise with different levels of efficiency and so on. This is my only slide on this. I do want to say one or two things though. We essentially crucially use this recent, very nice result of Blanc and Valiant, which shows essentially that like adaptive adversaries for a bunch of statistical problems are not really any more powerful than oblivious adversaries. Adaptive adversary here means essentially that you draw a bunch of samples from your distribution and then the adversary gets to mess things up. Oblivious adversary means that the adversary gets to corrupt the distribution without looking at the particular samples you got from the distribution. Okay, so they have a kind of powerful and general result, which shows that via this kind of very, clean and elementary subsampling technique, although the analysis is not, simple, subsampling essentially neutralizes that activity is what they show, right? Like if I draw a whole bunch of examples, but I only take a small random fraction of them, I'm kind of taking my sample and making it like the background distribution. So hopefully it's an intuitively plausible thing. That's
Part of the result, then you wanna think about like malicious versus nasty as like adaptive versus oblivious.
there's like an element of that. Yeah, we have to go through kind of these multiple different stages, but it's a little bit of it, yeah. Maybe, again, this may be too small for you to read, but if you can make out what's going on over here, we have a polynomial in 1 over delta, 1 over that confidence parameter overhead, which is not very efficient. We typically want, for path learning, like we want the dependence on the confidence parameter to be logarithmic or polylogarithmic. So to do that, you need to amplify your success probability. It's like the usual thing. If you can learn a good hypothesis with probably 3/4, you want to be able to learn a good hypothesis with probably 1 minus delta. So you need success probability amplification. And again, this is like a homework problem, an easy homework problem in the usual setting where there's no noise. In this nasty noise setting, because you lose the independence, it takes some work. It's an argument of a couple of pages, and you can even show that you have to do the work. The usual way of just, hey, run it a bunch of times and like, pick the one that does the best, that provably fails. It's weird. It's a little bit weird in nasty.
What do we do?
You do something else, it'll take too long. Yeah. It's not that different from the, it's not that different, but you have to do some non-trivial analysis. Yeah. So most of what I want to tell you about is the fixed distribution learning setting. This is in the slide 2 when I was like, oh, it's more, whoops, my laptop isn't battery, but this is what I was saying, like it's more complicated in the fixed distribution setting. So I'll tell you the results and then I'll really focus in. I'll give you some idea for actually 2 of them. I want to give you some good news at the end of the day. So I'll start with that. There is a positive result for a broad and natural class of algorithms, which I call ignore contradictory examples algorithms, ICE algorithms. Okay, if you can learn in your malicious setting with an ICE algorithm, then you can learn in the nasty setting up to a factor of 2 in the noise rate. Okay, so that's a positive result. We'll kind of go through that. It's pretty clean and simple. There's a negative result, which says, hey, remember how I needed this factor of 2 in the noise rate for nasty versus malicious for ICE algorithms? You need that factor of 2. You can't do better under a cryptographic hardness assumption, okay? And then there's a real negative result, which is like this qualitative condition. I remember this was like about ICE algorithms. If you have an ICE algorithm that can handle malicious, then you have an ICE algorithm that can handle nasty at rate like eta over 2. If you don't have an ICE algorithm, that goes out the window. There can be an arbitrary separation. I'll tell you about all these things in more detail now. This is just to get the first rinse of it into your head. Good. So let me start with the positive news, the good news. I'll tell you what an ICE algorithm is. An ICE algorithm is an algorithm, a learning algorithm, where if you give it contradictory examples, it ignores them. Okay? Its behavior is unaffected by adding or subtracting pairs of contradictory examples from the data set. So you can think of it as like, how does an ICE algorithm work? It gets its data set, it looks at all of the data points, and it's like, oh, I see that, here I have a particular example X and it's labeled 0, and I have the same copy of the same example and it's labeled 1, I just throw them both away. You do this again, if there's any other pairs of contradictory examples, you do it until there's no more contradictory examples. So there is at least the possibility of a functional relationship explaining your data, and then you run some other learning algorithm.
And so if I have a zero batch
Sorry, what?
Push button.
This is a batch regime. You should think about like, this is all for like, you have a batch of data points that you're giving us input. Yeah.
If I have two copies of X plus and one copy of X minus, do I throw all three away or just throw two of them away?
That would be rash. You should throw two of them away. Yeah, sorry, you should throw away the contradictory pair.
Okay,
Yeah.
keep the third guy.
Keep the third guy, yeah.
Okay,
It's no longer contradictory once you throw away the first pair.
okay.
Yeah. So,
Maybe
you know,
to continue with this question, what if you have 5 of this and 7 of that?
discard 5 times, and then you're left
What's
with
the
the two
difference
things.
between 2 and 1? and
The
5 and
difference
7?
between 5 and 7 is 2, so you'd be left with 2.
No,
throw away
I
the
have to
5
do it
con-
multiple
You
times.
throw away the 5 contradictory pairs. Yeah, I think it's just what I said. Repeatedly remove a pair of contradictory examples until you can't do it
Or
anymore.
just add up all the labels.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I don't want to flog this too hard. Why would you care about ICE algorithms? Well, if you hire a sophomore to like, do your machine learning or something, they might actually do this as a pre-processing step. I might do this as a pre-processing step. It's a non-crazy way to pre-process a data set that has contradictory examples. And, one way to capture that is if you think about what a correlational statistical query algorithm does. I don't want to go into it. It's really unaffected by contradictory examples. It changes the correlation with your function by 0. You add and subtract correlation. So it is kind of, it's a non-trivial class of algorithms. Real algorithms have this ICE property.
It's kind of unusual to have the same, unless are you thinking about this as like subroutines as well? So like, it's kind of unusual to have.
The exact contradictory example.
Right.
So I mean, I encouraged you to think about this as uniform distribution learning, in which case, it's pretty unlikely. But like it could be an arbitrary fixed
But
distribution.
once you do the subsampling, maybe that makes it more likely.
So you don't need to think about subsampling in this context. Yeah, just for like any fixed distribution, this is what we'd be doing to do the preprocessing. Yeah. Okay, so let me now, again, I told you this already, but we're just stating it again, since we're more comfortable with ICE algorithms now. This is the positive result. If you have a concept class and you can epsilon delta learn that concept class with an ICE algorithm, okay, in the presence of eta malicious noise. So if you have an ICE algorithm that handles malicious noise, then you also have an efficient, efficient ICE algorithm that handles malicious noise. Then you also have an efficient algorithm for learning, basically the same parameters, 1.01 epsilon, 1.01 delta, in the presence of nasty noise, as long as the nasty noise rate is at most, 0.499 times eta. So if you can handle eta rate of malicious noise with an ICE algorithm, I should have written with an ICE algorithm down here, then you can handle 0.499 eta rate nasty noise as well. Okay, so for ICE algorithms, nasty is not that much tougher than malicious.
Does ICE go to ICE?
ICE go to ICE?
Yeah.
No, I don't think it's, I'm not sure. I'm not sure that the second thing is ICE.
Okay.
Maybe a very naive question in line of what you just said. I know that's probably going to be wrong, but why? What prevents you from taking any algorithm, ICE or not ICE, and just reprocessing by throwing out the example of here you are?
Throwing out the contradictory examples, then you have an ICE algorithm. If you do that, that's an ICE algorithm.
No, but basically that take this way. Well, this way you can convert any algorithm to a nice algorithm.
The exact counterexample is gonna show you why that might break the algorithm.
Yeah, keep listening. I think the other results may illuminate this question. Yeah.
Maybe it's a same contradiction. So if there is no contradictory example in your training set, then this will happen, right? So we're basically saying that can I give a statement that my data set doesn't have any contradictory example, then whatever algorithm I use to get to malicious noise, I can convert it to something for that.
If your data set doesn't have any contradictory examples, then running any algorithm would be the same thing as running an ICE algorithm. Yeah. So that's right. Okay, so we're comfortable this is some kind of a positive result for these restricted class of algorithms, for ICE algorithms. That was the good news. The not as good news is the only crypto assumption in this is that one-way functions exist, or really pseudo-random functions, same thing, of course. You're not going to do better than this factor of 2. So where we saw the positive result with a 0.499, if we change that to a 0.501 eta, 0.501, it goes out the window. So there is a concept class and a malicious noise rate of eta, this could be any constant, such that if there's eta rate malicious noise, you do really well. You learn to kind of the optimal accuracy you could hope to learn to with high confidence with the nice algorithm. But if nasty noise is there at rate 0.501 eta, you can't do anything. You can't achieve non-trivial learning with any non-trivial probability. Okay? So this kind of says the result with the 0.499 was optimal, but this is again a statement about ICE algorithms. And the second negative result is if we don't insist that we have an ICE algorithm, then the gap can be arbitrarily large. So there's a concept class which you can learn in the presence of eta rate malicious noise. You can learn it efficiently at high accuracy, but even if the nasty noise rate is 1% of eta, 0.001 eta, whatever you want, you can't do anything. Okay? So the ICE restriction was crucial to getting the result as well. Okay. Good, so I think I told you the results. I want to do two things in the rest of the talk. I want to give you the idea behind the positive result for ICE algorithms, this thing which said, hey, if you have an ICE algorithm, there is only like a factor or two. It's simple, it's a bunch of pictures. Okay, so we'll look at the pictures and we'll get the idea for that. And then I want to tell you, if I have time, about the idea for the second negative result, this thing where there was like, a factor of 100 or a factor of 1,000 or whatever. For non-ICE algorithms, being able to handle eta rate malicious noise doesn't even mean you can handle 0.001 eta rate nasty noise. Okay, and this is gonna be the one that involves crypto if we get to it. Okay, so let's do it. Again, I'm just restating the positive result. There is nothing at all new on this slide. This is reminding you of the definition of ICE algorithms. They discard pairs of contradictory examples, then they do something else. And this is just writing the theorem again. You saw all these words before on the previous slide. If you can handle eta rate malicious noise with an efficient ICE algorithm, you can handle 0.499 eta rate nasty noise with an efficient algorithm. Okay. Okay. To prove this, we go through an intermediate model, which is sort of this offline malicious noise. We call it strong malicious noise. So this is just reminding you of the original definition of malicious noise. It's like this online thing. An example comes along. If the eta coin comes up heads for the adversary, he gets to corrupt it. And it's done in this online way. Okay? An intermediate model, which is stronger than this model, is like an offline version. Now the adversary, the entire clean data set is drawn, the adversary gets to see it, and then with knowledge of the entire data set, those coins are tossed, and when the coin comes up heads, he gets to corrupt it. So he still is not, it's not like nasty noise, he's not choosing which examples to corrupt. It still is, at the mercy of the coin toss, but now he gets to corrupt it, knowing what all the future examples are going to be. Make sense? Okay, so the only difference with the original malicious noise model is the online-offline nature of what the adversary can do. So we show that it's, again, heavily relies on this Blanc-Valiant result, that if you can handle standard malicious noise, you can handle strong malicious noise. Okay? So, yeah, this is the icon for strong malicious noise. We'll see this a couple more times. So given this, I'm not going to talk about this, but given this, you can see what remains to be done. We have to show that if you can handle strong malicious noise at rate eta, you can handle nasty noise at rate, 8/2, essentially. Okay, question?
Are these results constructed?
Yeah, it's a very, very simple algorithmic transformation. The algorithm is just, you draw a big data set and you subsample from it, and you run the the original algorithm, and it works, yeah. Good. So our job is to show that if we can handle strong malicious noise, we can handle nasty noise. We're going to see this via a sequence of pictures, okay? So let's start off by thinking about a clean data set, which is, it's just the green means clean, right? It's a clean data set, no noise, before the strong malicious adversary does any kind of corruption. Call it S star. It's like this bar of clean examples, okay? What's the deal with strong malicious noise? Well, the strong malicious adversary gets to look at the entire data set, and then some coins are tossed. For the purposes of pictures, I made all the coins come up heads at the end, just to have a reasonable picture. And these are the points that the strong malicious adversary gets to corrupt, right? This is what he gets to do. And the rest of it is, this is the remaining part. Notice this is clean. These are independent clean examples from the distribution. It's kind of nice. Now let's change our point of view. I could think about those examples, the ones where the noise coin came up tails, as being an initial clean data set for a nasty adversary. Think about if it was a nasty adversary with this like 0.499 eta noise rate, okay? Because I mean, that's what it is. This is like some clean data set of examples. It's like what the nasty guy would get to see and then corrupt. Okay, so how do nasty adversaries work? Well, you know, the nasty adversary looks at the whole thing S and picks some fraction of them, okay, you know, binomial kind of fraction of them to corrupt. And he converts them from whatever they used to be to some new malicious stuff, some new nasty stuff. That's a new terrible thing. So far, so good? Okay, now we're gonna go back to the old point of view, right? Back to the point of view of the malicious adversary. We think of the entire original, let's go back, the entire original malicious data set. It was like this S and then the malicious stuff. And you know, in the nasty perspective, that S is like it's got an old part which gets replaced and would be replaced to become a new part. Okay, so this is the picture. It's like, you know, the old part, the Z part that the malicious guy is going to corrupt, etc. What can the malicious adversary do? Well, his budget is eta, and the nasty guy's budget was 0.499 eta. So almost certainly this is less than like half of this. And so what does that mean? It means that the malicious guy, if he wants, he can spend half of his noise budget on making contradictory versions of these examples, right? For every data point in here, he throws down the same data point with the opposite label. Now they're contradictory, they're going to get wiped out by the ICE algorithm. They will vanish, okay? And he can spend the other half of his noise budget to generate the new noise examples that the nasty guy would have put down. Okay, I think there's a picture for this. There isn't a picture for this, sorry, but hopefully it's clear, right? This is something that the malicious guy could do. And again, since we have an ICE algorithm, when he makes like an evil doppelganger of this half of the old stuff, it'll get wiped out, it'll go away, and then he uses the other half to replace it to become the new thing. So hopefully this makes it clear, the malicious guy at noise rate eta can exactly simulate what the nasty guy who had noise rate 0.499 eta would have done. And our assumption was that we can learn if there's eta rate malicious noise, but you know, whatever the nasty guy could have done is something the malicious guy could have done, so we can handle whatever the nasty guy would have done. Okay, so it's not very difficult. You have to be careful, you know, blah, 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 coupling, doing things carefully to really do it, but hopefully the idea is pretty simple and pretty clear.
Why is it 0.499, is it 0.5?
You know, because
Why just lose this?
I want high confidence that I really come in under half these, yeah, I think it's more than 0.5. Yeah. Okay. Okay, good. So now, how much time do I have left? 7 minutes. Okay. Did I start out before? Or?
Yeah, it's too.
Okay. So I hit the 4th. Okay. I'll do what I can. Okay, I'll try not to go too long. Yeah, I think I can get this done. I think I can get this done pretty quickly. So what do I want to convince you of now? I want to convince you that if we stop talking about ICE algorithms, if we just think about generic algorithms, there can be an arbitrary separation. There's a concept class which is learnable by an efficient algorithm at noise rate eta if it's malicious noise, but is not even learnable in any non-trivial way, terrible accuracy, terrible confidence, if the noise is nasty and the noise is at rate 0.001 eta. Okay, so for non-ICE algorithms, big separation. And it's going to be a crypto construction. There are 3 ingredients, 2 of which fortunately we're already probably all very familiar with: pseudorandom functions, 2 source extractors, and the last one maybe you don't have in your pocket as much every day: large, low Hamming weight subcodes of efficiently erasure list decodable binary codes. So I'll spend the most time on that, and we'll see how they get used in the construction. First, pseudorandom functions. I don't think anybody here needs me to tell them this. What's a pseudorandom function? It's a bunch of functions, you know, indexed by some key, like a singly exponential, say, size collection of functions, where the functions are efficiently computable. But if you're a polynomial time algorithm that is interacting with one of these functions, you can't distinguish it from a truly random function. Okay, pseudorandom functions. We know them, we love them. Russell told us that if we have one-way functions, we have pseudorandom functions. So the assumption that we have one-way functions gives us these things. And the key thing we're going to use about them is that they're hard to learn. If you have a class of pseudorandom functions, that's not an efficiently learnable concept class. Because if you could learn it, certainly that will let you distinguish it that it's not a truly random function. Okay. Okay, so this is going to be our first thing. Like pseudorandom functions are hard to learn. We're going to use that. We're also going to use 2 source extractors. It's probably not worth going into the details of this. Just think of it as like, what does a 2 source extractor do? as long as you feed it a draw from some underlying distribution which has high min entropy, just think of it as that the underlying distribution that X is coming from, all we're gonna need is that it's uniform over a large but bizarre set. So like, if you had a random string X, which was uniform over 0, 1 to the n, it's perfectly random, you wouldn't need anything. Imagine you have a random X, which is uniform over some big, but like, funny set. And you'd like it to become a random, you'd like to convert it, you'd like to extract the randomness and get, a random draw from 0, 1 to the m or something, right? This is what a two-source extractor lets you do. You feed in a short, truly uniform seed, you get a draw out, which, extracts the randomness from your K source, and it gives you a draw from a distribution which is very close to uniform. And we have fantastic two-source extractors with all kinds of great parameters that we don't need to look at the details of, okay? But these things are out there, and they're out there with very, very short seeds. You could imagine enumerating over all these seeds in polynomial time.
Not quite right, two source, or
Excuse me?
seeded extractor or something?
Seeded extractor. I wrote two source for some reason. Sorry, you're right. No, yeah, of course, this is the seed. It is indeed a seeded extractor, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, you're completely right. Seeded extractor. I mean, there are two sources, but
Yeah.
one of them is the seed, so it's not the usual usage of the term two source extractor. I apologize. Good. Let me go a little slower on this thing about the random low Hemingway subcodes, et cetera. So just think for a minute about a random binary linear code with constant rate. Okay, so imagine you're stretching strings of length 0.001 n to strings of length n via a random binary linear code. Okay, couple of facts about random linear codes. If you have a code like this, it's efficiently erasure list decodable. So what do these parameters mean? The one latest C prime means that even if you erase, think of it as like 99% of the bit positions, so you see a string with 99% question marks and 1% zeros and ones from the original code word, you can list decode it, you get a constant size set of candidates out that are consistent with it. Okay, not a particularly hard fact, the fact about random binary linear codes. This is true with extremely high probability for a random binary linear code. Another fact that's true with extremely high probability, or at least constant probability, which is all we need for such a code, is that it's going to have some light code words. Okay? In particular, there's too many parameters floating around the slide. Think of this as like 0.01 n. And the thing we're going to do to put these facts together is if this happens with 99% probability and this happens with even 2% probability, they both happen. Okay, so we're going to combine these facts and say there exists a binary linear code with both these properties. It's efficiently list decodable, even in the presence of 99% erasures. Okay, and it's got exponentially many light code words. Okay. And we're going to see why having light code words is really important for us. We're going to call that W. It's like a subcode. It's just the light code words of this random binary linear code. That if I get one of those code words where 99% of the entries have been replaced with question marks, I can decode efficiently to a constant size list of candidates that it could have come from. Okay? And there's a lot of entropy if I had a random such code word because there's exponentially many words in that light subcode. So far, so good? Okay.
Binary linear, like the linear code thing important here, or?
It's important for the efficient decoding, yeah. Yeah, you just solve the system of linear equations to get it. We are going to need efficient decoding. Yeah. Good. So I think I could tell you about the concepts in the class, and yeah, I think we can. Okay. Good. So let me tell you about the concept class. What are the functions in this class? We think of each function in the class as being over sort of a two-part domain. The domain has like a key side where basically I'm hiding the key for a pseudorandom function up to a little bit of fuzz that I'll tell you about, and the value side where basically I'm putting the outputs of the pseudorandom function. Okay, so I'll get into more detail now. Each concept in the class is really specified by a pair of elements, one of these light code words, and a seed for an extractor. Okay, we'll go into exactly how this is done. We'll see the
Domain, the input.
domain is the input, the x's, So every possible x you get
Every
is,
possible input has a key side and a value side?
no,
Or
this-
there's a part of the input distribution that's a keys?
part of the domain, so the domain is like the set of possible x's, the inputs, the things that go into F. Part of it are like points that, sorry for touching your screen, part of it are points that live here, This is like the key part. Think of it as like a small fraction, about an eta fraction of the 2 to the n points in the domain, and the rest of it is these, yeah. We'll see a bunch of pictures that I think will make it clear. Right, so I'll show you pictures on the next slide, but just to preview it, the key side has a very redundant representation of the code word, okay? And the value side has outputs of a pseudo-random function. I'll just show you the picture. Good, so here's a picture of the key side. I made it a little bigger because I needed some space. The key side, like if the W, that now I'm showing you a particular target concept, so defined by a particular WS pair, okay? If the W is 1, 0, 1, whatever, 1, 0, blah, 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 I break the key side into n blocks. So each of these blocks, there's like about eta 2 to the n points everywhere. There's about eta 2 to the n over n points in each block. And it's a very boring concept there. It just always outputs 1 in the first block, always outputs 0 in the second block, because those are the bits of W and so on. Repetition code, not a very.
W is not the key, it's the code of the key.
I'll show you what the key is to the pseudorandom function right now, yeah. The key to the pseudorandom function is what you get by feeding the light vector W and the seed to not two source extractor, seed extractor. Yeah, that's the key, and then it's the output on input X is just the output of the pseudorandom function on that thing. Yeah. So like when you get an example, if it's an example over in the key side, and there was no noise, you'd learn 1 bit of W. You would learn W very quickly, but when you get examples over here, they look pseudo-random. All hope is not lost though, because you're getting information about W, and W is, the bulk of what goes into the key.
So basically to learn, you have to learn W.
You better learn W, exactly the right way to think about it, yeah. So there's 2 things I have to argue for you now. I should argue that with nasty noise, you can't solve this problem. And I should argue that with malicious noise, you can solve this problem. So first we'll do the first one, it's easy. You have, let's say 0.01 eta rate nasty noise, okay? What's the nasty guy gonna do? He's gonna try to make sure you don't learn anything about W, because that would be a good way to keep you in the dark, right? So he's gonna corrupt all of the examples which are in the 1 blocks on the key side. Remember, these are light strings. On the key side, you only have, 0.01 eta fraction of the bits, or sorry, 0.01% of the bits are ones in this thing. So he doesn't have to spend a lot of like nasty examples in order to mess you up, right? I showed you, 2 of these things are ones, but really it's 1% of these blocks are made up of ones. So, at the cost of making few corruptions, he can flip those ones to 0 and you're out of luck. You don't see anything, right? This is cheap for him to do because only 1% of these bits are 1. And we said something like an eta fraction of the domain is in this key side.
But in the malicious noise, they don't get to control which ones they get to flip. And so in each block, they have to have, the majority has to be correct.
Russell doesn't need the last few slides. So, yeah, I'll go through them anyway in just 2 minutes for the rest of the audience. But yeah, at this point, hopefully it's clear that in the nasty noise setting, the nasty guy can carry out this nasty plan when he sort of makes his noisy corruptions this way. What's your life like as the learner? As the learner, you're going to see no information at all on the key side. You're only going to see zeros. They're going to be in random locations. There's no information. So your life as the learner is, well, you're trying to learn essentially a pseudo-random function with a uniform random key. Up to the slop because of the extractor not being perfect. This is your life. Your life is not good, right? You're going to have only a miserable chance of getting a decent hypothesis. Okay? So it's hard in the nasty noise setting, and I'll close with just a slide or 2 on the non-nasty setting. First, let's just pretend there's no noise, okay? Well, if there's no noise, hopefully we've convinced ourselves already that you can learn, right? You would draw some examples, you'd see a bunch of 1s in this block, a bunch of 0s in this block, a 1 in this block. You learn all the blocks, whether it's 1 or 0, you learn the string W. Once you know the string W, right, you know W, well, you can just try all the seeds of the extractor, and eventually you'll find the correct, the correct seed. You'll see, hey, when I tried this as my key, it was doing perfectly on the value side, right? And so you're done. It's an easy problem if there's no noise. What if you do have this eta rate malicious noise? Well, let's think about what happens. This is just repeating what Russell said. In the process of sort of having the malicious noise affect the data, first and eta fraction of examples have sort of been removed, but we haven't corrupted them yet. Let's take a peek at like, the data before the corrupted examples are put back in. So we had, our clean examples, we took out eta fraction of them at random. We have 1 minus eta fraction of clean examples now. Let's just pretend that we set up the numbers in such a way that every block has either 100, plus or minus 10 examples in it. These are the ones of the like 1 minus eta data that survived after the examples that are going to be noised were taken out. So there's no noise. All these guys have the same label. All these guys have the same label. If we could see this data, we'd be in great shape, just like in the previous slide. I'd know all the bits of W, right? Okay. What is the adversary going to try to do? Well, a smart adversary, the best thing the adversary can do is try to confuse you about what this bit is, what this bit is, what this bit is, what all these bits are. But you can see we have the adversary up against the wall because our code is erasure list decodable. Okay, so now we're going to look at like actually what do we see when there is eta rate malicious noise. Okay, so now the data set that the learner gets on the key side is both the black stuff and the purple stuff. This is what a smart adversary would do, right? He would try to put you in the dark as to like, oh, I see 3 1s here and 3 zeros. I don't know what this bit should be, right? Like this is kind of, you could show this is sort of the best thing he could do. Again, like maybe let's go through some numbers. So, before we noised it, before the noisy points were put back in, you have between 90 and 110, correctly labeled bits in each block. What is the adversary going to do? Well, if he puts in, even 89 zeros into this block, which had 91s, you see it was a 1 block originally, right? He didn't put in enough noisy examples to confuse you. So he's got to add at least 90 noisy examples to each block to confuse you. That's kind of expensive, right? He only has a limited noise budget. He can't add 90 noisy examples to each block. I didn't set it up in enough detail for you to see that, but take my word for it, okay? Even with an eta noise budget, he doesn't, and this is because, again, like, before the nasty guy only had to fight 1% of the blocks, but this guy has to fight essentially all the blocks. If he doesn't corrupt essentially every block, since it's this erasure list decodable code, you'll be able to figure out, a small list of candidates. And so given the eta noise budget, indeed, he can't add enough mislabeled examples to each block, maybe a 2% fraction of the blocks or something. He's not able to confuse you as to what they are. So you end up, as the learner, you exactly, look at how many zeros and ones that I have in this block. Oh, same number, I make a question mark. How many zeros and ones did I have in this block? Same number, I make a question mark. You can't do that for every block. For 2% of the blocks or whatever, you'll have a surplus of zeros or a surplus of ones. So you end up with exactly the input that the erasure list decoding algorithm wants. You run that algorithm, you get a constant size list of candidates out. For each of those candidates, you try it with the suitable seed of the extractor and you succeeded in learning. Okay, so that's kind of how it goes. Does it make sense? Okay, good. I think that's it. So just to remind you of the results, we saw them in the distribution free setting. We didn't do the proofs, but I told you that nasty and malicious noise are equally challenging. If you can handle eta rate nasty noise, you can handle eta rate malicious noise. You can upgrade malicious noise tolerance to the tougher model at the same noise rate. But that's not true in the fixed distribution setting. Even if you can handle eta rate malicious noise for the uniform distribution, you may not be able to handle even 0.001 eta rate nasty noise. But there's a ray of hope. If your algorithm was a nice algorithm that could handle malicious noise, then there is this factor of 2 or less.
All right, I guess I'm now following the construction 100%. So like, where are we using this fixed distribution property in this last?
I mean, we were using it in a couple of places. One place we used it is the fact that, like here, when I said I get the right number of examples in each block, like in order to have some predictability about how many examples I'm getting per block, I'm kind of using like a fixed distribution thing there. If I had an arbitrary distribution, another reason it might not be, if you have an arbitrary distribution, it could put all of the weight on examples on the value side. You'd never have a chance of seeing anything about the key at all. So it would be hopeless to like learn anything about the pseudorandom function like this. Yeah, this construction is just hard under many non-uniform distributions that don't put weight on the key side. Yeah. Other questions? Russell?
So it seems like your nasty adversary just used deletions.
I mean, he deleted, but then what do you mean? No, he also pumped, oh, sorry, the nasty adversary. No, he flipped things, right? Like he didn't just delete things, like before the noise, it looked like this on the key side, and if he only deleted these examples, you'd be like, huh, I got 0 examples in this block. I bet the nasty adversary deleted the examples and it was a 1, right? He flipped them from 1 to 0. So he's only flipping labels. Yeah, it's like it's against even a weak form of nasty adversary, which only makes label flips. But he's not just deleting the examples, yeah. But it is like flipping labels is the only thing he does. In fact, for the proof of you know, like he wants to really make sure that there's no information here. And the way to make sure there's no information here is to make sure that the labels are all 0 and the locations don't leak any information. So, you know, he should either just flip the random examples that you got or replace them with
If I,
other uniform examples.
if I just delete all the ones in the key space,
Yeah,
isn't that enough to wipe out all the information? Oh, I see, you're saying, then I delete which ones I'm deleting.
I would look and I would be like, huh, this is very suspicious. And there
Yeah.
are no examples in this block.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, that's it. There's a picture from the hike at the end, and a picture of Dr. Seuss and the cat. Thanks.